And our job is to make sure that it does. And I can tell you, those doubters, the American dream is alive and well. The biggest impediment is not the people, it is the government in Washington, and we have got to change that government directly and forward. Quite simply has become too big, too powerful, too expensive, too intrusive. The left always talks about sustainability. The least sustainable institution in America today is the federal government with its spending and governing habits, and it must be changed. You know, just one fact, and I'll probably tell you a couple of others. Today, you know where 6 of the 10 wealthiest counties in America are? They're not around New York, the financial capital of the world. They're not around LA, the media capital, or in the Silicon Valley. They surround Washington, D.C. And what do they make in Washington, D.C.? They make credits and exemptions and loopholes and laws and regulations. The government has become a captive of an inner beltway mentality of lobbyists, lawyers, the rich and the powerful, and they have ceased serving in the American people's interest. And let me tell you what I would do to reform that. First, we have to reduce the size of the government. We repeal Obamacare, and we can lay off everybody in the health department or the IRS charged with implementing it. We get rid of Common Core, and we can get rid of all those educators in the education department trying to dictate to every kid in every community in every state how we are educated. I believe we could reduce the size of the federal workforce by 15%, dramatically lower its cost, make it more efficient, and make it work for the American people instead of those special interests. And people are going to say, well, you can't do that. You know, oh, sure, it sounds great. And others are going to tell you, well, this is what I'm going to do. Can I tell you something? In New York State, one of the deepest blue states, when I left, I reduced the size of the state workforce by over 15%, and our government worked better. I did it in New York. We can do it in Washington. We can take back that government. So let me tell you one of the other things I want to do. I don't want to just reduce the size and the power and the cost. I want to reduce the power of those lobbyists and that interest group. You know how it works today? Today, there are over 400 former members of Congress who are registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C. You get elected from any community, any state, either party. You know, within 6 months, you play the game. You've got it made for life. If you retire or don't run again or don't win, you can be a lobbyist in Washington and make 10 times as much peddling influence there as going back to the people you're supposed to be representing. That is wrong. It's got to stop. And let me tell you, day one, I would introduce a law. You serve 1 day in Congress, the House or Senate. There is a lifetime ban on your ever being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. We want to go back to the people who said we are conservative interests. Congress seems to exempt itself, think that they can operate differently from the American people. They pass Obamacare. They say this is what's right for every single American. We're going to repeal it. But by the way, another reform I would make, Congress passes a law that applies to the American people. It has got to apply to every member of Congress and every one of their staff as well. No more exempting themselves from these rules. And by the way, the tax code, I don't know if any of you can do your own taxes anymore. I know it's pretty much impossible. 74,600 pages of lawyer-written, lobbyist-driven, interest group reflecting gobbledygook. Incomprehensible. And that's the IRS tax laws that we are supposed to live under. It has got to go. I would throw out the entire code, get rid of all those exemptions or loopholes except for a few like the home mortgage interest deduction and charitable deduction, dramatically lower the rates, lay off every single crooked political activist in the IRS, have a lower rate, a simpler system, a fairer system, and grow the economy, and the American dream would spring back to life in the minds of everyone. Again, people are going to say, well, you can't do that sort of thing. Well, I want to just tell you a little bit about what I was able to do when I was governor of New York. I took office in the bluest of the blue states. We had the worst credit rating in America. We had the highest tax burden in America. We were dead last in private sector jobs. By the way, we were the most dangerous state in America when I took office. And as I took office, that great liberal icon left behind, as a surprise gift to me, a $5 billion deficit back when $5 billion was actual real money. That's what 20 years of failed liberal governance, even in a state like New York, left behind. When I left, we had reduced the state workforce by over 15%. We had reduced taxes by $143 billion, more than the other 49 states combined. We had almost 700,000 more private sector jobs. We had our highest credit rating in generations and billions of dollars in surplus because Republican conservative policies work and empower people with opportunity instead of dependency. And the worst, but you know, the worst part of when I became governor of New York was this. And it seems that the Democrats and liberals so love the poor they can't help but continually create more of them through their policies. When I took office, 1 in 11 of every man, woman, and child in the state of New York was on welfare. Think about that just for a second. In the United States of America, not that far back, from the tip of Long Island to the Adirondack Mountains, 1 in 11 of every single man, woman, and child in the state of New York was on welfare. Not Medicaid, not Social Security, not disability, welfare. Because the Democrats had created a system where they went to people who wanted to be part of the American dream and said, we'll take care of it. We'll put all these programs in place because you can't compete. You can't take advantage of the American dream. You're not good enough. You need us to provide for you. Well, we changed all that from top to bottom. We replaced dependency with opportunity. When I left, we had over 1 million fewer people on welfare than when I took office. We changed hundreds of thousands of people's lives, gave them the confidence, the self-worth, the belief in themselves that they could live the American dream, and that is what our policies are about for this country, empowering people with opportunity instead of trapping them in dependency. I see so many problems facing our country, but I'm a solutions guy. And when you look at those problems, that's what Americans do. We solve problems and overcome them, and I know that we can. Our freedom is at risk because of the intrusive power in Washington, but it's also at risk because of radical Islam. And we have a president who won't even call it by its name. As Chairman Pope said earlier, I was the governor on September 11th. And I will never forget the lessons of that day, the horror and the suffering. Too many Americans, it seems to me, have already forgotten. Before that date, many Americans felt that, well, Al-Qaeda, radical Islam, was across an ocean thousands of miles away. It didn't pose a threat to us here in America. Well, it did, and thousands of Americans lost their lives. ISIS today is every bit as dangerous as Al-Qaeda was on September 10th of 2001. We are at greater risk of being attacked today than at any time since September 11th. This is not the time for us to weaken our military. This is the time for us to strengthen our military. And we cannot let radical Islam, whether it's ISIS, Boko Haram, or Al-Qaeda, have recruiting centers, training centers, planning centers where they can organize to attack us here in America, because sadly they will. Now, I'm not in favor of a trillion-dollar war or a decade-long war of nation building in a place where democracy's never existed, but we can't forget the lesson of September 11th. We should empower those on the ground, provide stronger armaments, training, and support to the Kurdish Peshmerga. We should arm and organize the Sunni Arabs who detest ISIS and will help us fight that battle. We should help other countries on the front line of that fight, whether it's Jordan or Saudi Arabia. And to the extent it is necessary, we should send over American forces, destroy those training camps, destroy those recruiting centers before they have the chance to attack us here again, and then get out. I don't say that lightly. My wife Libby and I had two sons. My older son Teddy, after college, went in the Marines, became a lieutenant, and served for a year in Anbar in Iraq. My younger son, Owen, after college, went in the 10th Mountain Division, became a lieutenant, and just got back from Afghanistan in September. Believe me, I know what it's like for a parent to lie awake at night worrying about a phone call when your child is overseas in harm's way. I do not want to see one American mother or father, one